we haven't had any customers saying, we really need this. This is a deal breaker, or this, you really need to focus on this one. So we haven't started working on it. I have some ideas. I explored the libvirt. I think they call it backup thingy, which is basically a change block tracking. And then I also considered the possibility of using the Ceph feature to get the delta from there as if it was a change block tracking feature, so that then we could write the blocks into Swift, S3 compatible, or anything else with the chunk backup driver. But yeah, the problem is the amount of time required to do this, basically. Because in OpenStack, we usually try to approach this kind of features in a way that we don't favor a specific backend. So instead of making it just work for Ceph, we would also require for anybody working on this to have a generic solution. And the generic solution would go through using libvirt. So currently the problem,
all the implementations, so be it storage backends, so be it Google, S3, even the POSIX one would benefit from change block tracking, which is not there yet.
Yes, correct. They would all benefit, but that's the backend side. So how do you do the change block tracking? And that is the problem. For Ceph, like you said, it's easy. If you have a snapshot, you do the delta, and there you have it. That's your change block tracking. All right. Other drivers probably have different ways of doing it. So we would have to implement first a backend change block tracking feature, which would allow us to tell the different drivers to start tracking, and then they would need to start tracking things. And that's one side of it. But what if a backend doesn't support it? Then you have to go to front-end change block tracking using libvirt. And then what if we start doing things like I create a backup, then an incremental, then I delete the incremental, then I do another incremental. So the feature is non-trivial in its implementation and in the scope of needing both front and back end implementations. So yeah, I agree that this could be really beneficial. This could be give a real performance boost to any backups, because they are really slow. They consume a lot of CPU, a lot of network throughput, and everything. The problem is, who is going to work on this? Who is going to implement it? So yeah.
But what you're currently doing is you're not tracking the changes. You actually, creating a hash of every block. So you do that backwards. So you actually have the metadata already about the block, but then likely that data format will change. The block size doesn't work for implementations of other existing change block tracking. So that could even be a breaking change. But would you said you don't want to support it for one volume driver and not others? Wouldn't it be possible to have it like a feature flag? If the volume driver supports differentials, then make it more. Then use that as a base to create the blocks.
Yes.
Or store the incrementals just like the volume driver can produce them. So.
Yes.
Well, I know it's a trade-off, and I really like the generalizing of the features. But if it's like 95% or whatever the number is, Ceph installation, it would just be sad not to make use of that capability just because of your strict policy of not using a proprietary, a special feature that one implementation might have.
No, sorry, I explained it wrong. My bad. I'm not saying we don't want to use the Ceph feature because it's proprietary. It requires a specific code. What I was trying to say is that we need an abstraction on top of that works not only for Ceph, but for the others as well. If they don't implement it, they're a problem. But that means that we need to define an interface and then have the dialogue with the different vendors and say, hey, do you see any problem with this abstraction that we have added for your specific CVT? If they say, no, it works for me, then okay, we can do it, and the first implementation can be Ceph. Yes, but we need to define that abstraction, because we cannot just take the output of the delta from Ceph as it is. It will need to be messaged that data into the format we define between the different things. Because
thank you for clearing that up. Sorry, I missed this as well. Yeah.
And because that delta needs to be in both directions supported, we would need to, and the delta may not come back to the same kind of backend. So we would get the delta from Ceph. It would need to be transformed, written to the backup, and then once we do that, we would need to also do the other way around, support to read it from the store backup, which probably we could leverage what we currently have, writing objects, so that should be fine. But still, we need the general approach, and that maybe we could even split the feature in two and only work on the backend feature first, which is probably easier, but it would need to be generic, even if there's currently only one implementation.
All right, but I feel there's technically there's total agreement. Well, as in that would be a nice and a totally worthwhile addition to the current state of the drivers, to be able to consume that block differential indication, or like be like a bitmap, as in, please backend give me the bitmap of which blocks I need to look at for my next differential. Even if you remain with the current chunking implementation, just the indication which blocks you would actually need to check would be a great addition, right?
Yeah. Which is basically what the libvirt feature does. It has the backup feature that they describe is basically that. It creates a map of which blocks have been changed, so you can read it and then use it to only backup those. Yes. So I think we are in agreement that this could be great. I don't know if we have somebody that is willing to do the implementation at this point.
I'm just trying to find who actually donated or implemented the S3 implementation. I'm just wondering, somebody invested the time or whatever. Are they actually using it? Are they not running into the same thoughts or even issues, active issues of inefficiencies? They're not interested.
Well, the thing is that it's not only the S3 that has that problem. The Google Cloud backup driver also had that same problem. The Swift implementation also has that same problem. Basically, the NFS also has that same problem. Oh, they all have that. The only one that doesn't have it is RBD to RBD. And maybe we can also talk about the encryption one you said, which is also interesting and definitely should be somewhat easier to do, because it can be implemented in a chunked backup driver, right? Just like we currently support compress or not compress, we should be able to add encryption, right? Because what you really want is to get the data, encrypt it, and then, yeah. But,
yeah, exactly. Just honestly, even the most basic first step as a single shared AES key would be better than nothing, than sending unencrypted data to the third party. Yeah. Would that be a feature in itself, right? So that encryption,
yes.
To that abstraction
layer. The trick here is where would we keep that encryption key? Would it be in Barbican, like we do with volumes? Would it be or somewhere else. The encryption key.
Or would it just be a config value, right? Is it either really managed or is it just like statically configured?
Okay, I see what you mean. So we are not talking about a different encryption key for each of the backups or each project, but a global one. Okay, I see. Yep. Yes, so that nobody from the public side can
user-specific encryption is already available. If you use encrypted volumes for Cinder with Barbican as a key store, you have encrypted backups because the volume is backed up in its encrypted state, right? So that would work in any sense. But if somebody's not using encrypted volumes, I also want to add a layer of encryption towards the backup provider or backup storage.
Yep. The problem I see, for example, if you store it, the encryption with Barbican, is that your backups will be useless if your database goes out. You cannot recover anything, because if you lose also your Barbican database with encryption keys, you're gone. But yeah, this can be implemented, and it is considerably a smaller feature than the other one, I think.
All right, so you, as in the past, that's something you would expect a spec to be written for that one feature, and the other one is likely, as you said, split in two, and it's completely different things, so require different specs.
Yeah, they are completely different things. I don't know if anybody would be, again, the problem with some of the features is that either there is a developer interested in implementing it, or there is a customer of the companies one of those developers works on that is pushing for it, or there is a developer that says, oh, even if our customers is not asking for it, I have some cycles, so I will work on this because this is useful. So sometimes we have trouble finding the person that wants to work on a feature. And I think this probably is one of those cases.
All right, yeah, well, I first chose the mailing list to see, and then this operator out to see if anybody else is running into that, having the same thoughts, and yeah. Maybe, as you said, the joint group of people that wrote the different backup drivers, apart from the RBD, as they all benefit, might make sense to kind of join on the forces there and see, because all of those things we just discussed, as you said, would work for all the drivers immediately. It's not a proprietary thing from S3 that we're asking for. It's something that all of the non-RBD drivers would benefit from.
Yep.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Oh, thank you for the feedback. Yeah, the encryption, I had already looked at the CVT side of it, so I know about the complications on that side, but I hadn't thought of the encryption side once you store on a remote site, a public cloud, basically.
Would you then drop a spec, or should I drop a spec to work on about the CVT?
Well, to be honest, writing the spec would be the easy part. Is actually coding, writing the test, everything that would take longer. I mean, I can write a spec. The encryption specs should not be too complicated. It has a couple of things, but then I don't think I would have time to work on it.
But the encryption thing, I'm not trying to make the encryption or security sound simple, but it's a simple point where you add code functionality. The change block tracking, there's various approaches. Can we depend on libvirt to be there, and all of that? So that gets vastly complicated because of different components. That's why I'm kind of implying if you would drop a spec, I'd gladly help discussing. I'm not trying to just rush a feature through. I know this is complicated, but it's just seeing where to go next. Everybody agrees, as in, that would be great. How do we move forward? That's kind of what I'm asking.
Yeah, that's the problem. We need somebody that says, I will develop this. Yeah, because I can write the spec. The spec doesn't take too much time. But implementing it, if my company is not going to productize it, then it's hard for me to explain to my manager, hey, I spent a bunch of hours working on this feature that that our customers are not going to use.
If there's a spec, I would, from our side, we would donate our time, and we have working students, and we would get somebody to work on that particular feature. To me, most important is that there is that there's agreement how to do it, as in that there's a spec of which technology to use, where to add things, and which trade-offs to make, to not have a working student sit on that and then have something working, and it's all depending on libvirt, and everybody says no, we can't do that. That's why I'm saying it would be great to have something that is accepted by you guys and say, well, that would be very nice as a feature, and this is kind of the guardrails of how to implement that, and we would devote the time to at least give it a proper shot to implement it then.
Okay, I can look into the encryption side of the spec. So I can write the spec, propose it, and we can try to get to an agreement. If you are fine with providing the manpower to actually implement it. And I will even review the code that they write.
That'd be cool, yeah. And about the change block tracking, I don't know which one is more important, actually. It depends on who you ask. It's always somebody has more.
I know it's more important, but that spec is also more problematic because I would actually need to know the different information that the change block tracking can get from the different backends. So I don't know the different mappings that they return, and what would be a reasonable abstraction over those different formats. Because for Ceph, I'm not sure we can get the mapping in itself, because the command we are using, if I remember correctly, does not return you the bitmap, let's say, of what had changed. It returns you the actual chunks. This is a chunk and another. So at that point, you don't have a bitmap. You would have to generate a bitmap, and that would be bad. So it would be bad if to generate a bitmap, you actually have to get all the data. Then provide the bitmap, and then have a different one read it again. That would not make sense. So there will be different drivers probably. Some of them will only have the feature of giving you the chunks. Other may just give you a bitmap. So that's why that spec is more complicated and requires more time to actually figure out, because I haven't, at least I don't have that much experience with CBT. So that's why I'm not offering to write the spec myself. For the encryption
side, the brainstorming phase that we're doing now, just dumping those ideas or things that were not considered because of, right? As in things that have already been looked at, kind of like the thoughts you have that we have on our side, kind of where to dump that, where to kind of bring that together, and to commonly work on the general idea, and then maybe end up with a spec, not asking you to just provide something that's ready to be implemented.
Okay, I can try to do a brain dump of the things I consider, when I can probably find some of my notes on this topic and do a brain dump, and at least there would be something for if somebody at some point wants to start working on this.
Okay, very cool. Thank you very much. Thank you.
If possible, could I get some way of contacting you, an email or something? Because otherwise, I may write the spec and have no way of letting you know that there is something out there.
Right. Yeah. Anything you like. Yeah. Email. I'm on Launchpad with my nick. I can drop you my email address if you want. The mailing list is linked there. That's my email address. Just drop me a message and.
Well, if you paste the email you send to the mailing list, a link to the archive, I can get your email from there.
That's their line 115. Lists OpenStack, Piper Mail, whatever. Then from September.
Perfect. Yep.
That's okay. me. That's me writing, and yeah. Thank you very much. And as I said, we have working students, and we gladly work on something that is agreed to be a good idea. Right? Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for bringing up that topic. And also, we were discussing the user survey feedback earlier, and I'm not sure if you would like to answer, you or anyone from the operator side would like to answer some of our questions that we had. We had some ambiguity in questions and would like to improve the user survey feedback experience and also the feedback that we get.
Was that a question to me?
Yeah, I was just giving some context. So I wanted to ask, like, did you get a chance to fill up the user survey feedback for Cinder?
Not for Cinder in particular. The last thing I did is the general survey about installations and which project you use and so on. That's the only data that I, as in a survey form, I gave out. There's a chance to still do that. Do you have a formal thing to fill in?
Yeah, I think Brian, you can fill me up in that. But yeah, I think we provide some feedback form, right?
Yeah, there's the general survey that you can do, but actually for us, if you had like feedback about bugs you've run into or operator pain points, if you just tell us, that's even better. Because the survey, we have to wait for like a year to get it, and then it's like the context is completely removed, and so we have a hard time sometimes putting together what the feedback is with any kind of context about what release or what exactly the problem is. So as long as you're here,
absolutely. As you can see, we are currently looking into the backup side of things. You might remember the idea we had about the deleting the snapshots that are in source, not waste storage. So that's kind of like our contact surface. We did upgrade to Xena and are on our way to latest. So we're just going through the updates, and it's gotten more and more smoothly. What we ran into might be due to the deployment. We're still using Puppet currently to generate the configuration, and certainly they're changing the style of how they template the config files. We just ended up that the backend host for I believe it was Cinder volume all of a sudden was the default is quite strange for the RBD backend. The backend host is generated. Or it's set to something generic if you have multiple stuff. If you have a highly available control plane, that's something we ran into, and we messed up a few of the volumes in the database, and we had to hotfix that. Something we worked around, but then so with Cinder in itself, we don't have any particular issues. Cinder backup, because we use that quite extensively, as you might have noticed. That's something we run into issues more and more, especially if there's many backups being triggered. The success rate is sometimes dropping, especially long-running backups. As soon as you restart a service, that backup goes into failed. It's not recovered anymore. It's not picked up again. Some issues here and there with the Cinder backup stability. Yes, the jobs that are not. As I said, there's no reconciliation in any sense. If somebody asks for a backup and that fails the first attempt, it's not retried, or that's something we run into. But apart from that, I wouldn't say there's any. It just works for us. As we have Ceph as the storage provider, and we use Leopard as the hypervisor, and together it just works. So. Something we are approaching is multi-availability zones, but in the coming months. So we first get up to the latest release, and then start changing the architecture. So that is something we will get in contact with, and we already found many knobs and things to consider, where to place your control plane, which availability zone to indicate for the scheduling and everything. That's something, but. That's out of the top of my head. Otherwise, shoot, if there's a particular aspect that.
On the backup front, the performance that you mentioned, I don't know in which release we did implement the possibility of having the Cinder backup service. First of all, it can be deployed in active. Then you can even tell the Cinder backup service that it should run multiple processes instead of a single process. So if you're doing compression, that would greatly improve the performance, both if you scale horizontally or if you scale vertically using multiple processes for the Cinder backup. And then another possibility is to limit the concurrency. So like you say, if you launch 20 backups, suddenly it is not going to end well. So sometimes you can also tell Cinder backup, okay, I don't want you to do more than 3 big operations at a time. Be it a backup or a restore, I don't care. Not more than 3 concurrently. So you can do it. I don't know in which release we implemented the different features, but maybe these are features that could be beneficial for your use case.
All right, we have the concurrency about the backups. We have that set. I'm just looking at it. Sorry, I'm a bit distracted. I was looking. We already used that to limit the number of concurrent backups that are being done. So that's already something we use. About we ran into that with a different OpenStack project, the coordination thing. So the locking, who is taking a job. So if you have a redundant control plane or an active mode, who is taking the backup job? So where is that scheduled? How's the coordination happening? What coordination backend is required to make that like really bulletproof? And as I said, if you restart a control plane node, then you're failing jobs that are currently running, and we constantly have jobs running. So it's always additional work, additional sanity checks that are run, see if there's failed backups, what's the fail reason, and so on.
Well, I think there is a way to stop the Cinder backup service without breaking things. The trick is that you are probably running it under systemd unit, right? And you just do system control stop, Cinder volume or something like that, Cinder backup or something like that. The way you stop it is that way. Then you have to change the timeout and say no timeout. Yes, take it as long as you want. In that way, you will not break ongoing backups. That is the trick that you need to do, because if it's going to take an hour to complete, what is going to happen if you stop the service normally is that systemd is going to try to stop it. The service is not going to stop in a minute, and it's going to get killed. So what you need to do is you do system control stop, say no timeout, and then it will eventually finish, which doesn't invalidate what you said about the backup service being able to automatically pick up where it left off. These are two different things. So I'm
because
just trying to
certainly you're right. You could wait for that one machine, but you don't want to have there's different other services you want to get through with the reboot. Let's say there's a kernel update that you need to do. You want to reboot that box. And certainly, yeah, you could wait a few minutes, but you never know how long the backup takes. As I said, sometimes there's backup that takes an hour because it's a multiple terabyte volume that's going through, and it's not picking up. And if it's user facing, then the user sees that it's a failed backup, and we recover for that. As I said, there's additional work being done. But I just looked at the support tickets that we have collected, and one thing that I forgot earlier is locks on the RBDs that are left. That happens occasionally. More. We're not a big install by any means, but we have that a couple of times. That there's a lock, an exclusive lock on the RBD that's just there left. There's not enough metadata, I believe, on the lock. We have the client, but we never know which service or in what relation that lock was there, but it's left sometimes. So that is something that we run in with Cinder occasionally. The RBD locking, exclusive locking, or however that's called, the RBD locks. But that's about the only issue with Cinder that we constantly see, apart from, as I said, the Cinder backup thingy not being fully bulletproof, and that requires a bit of housekeeping and cleanup all the time.
Yeah, just apart from the backup points we've discussed, like as I said, we did the user survey, and there are some questions on line 69, and you can take a look and see if you have similar. Like there are 3 sections. Some of the features some people requested, which we have already done. Some are actionable, like we would like to do that, and if you would also are inclined to. Would like those features to get in, and some questions which were very vague to us. So if you can just go through that list and see and provide us some feedback about it.
Just going through the question part. Active. That is how we're running. We're running on 3 control nodes, and they all run Cinder volume, Cinder schedule, and Cinder backup. As I said, so for us, apart from if there's a coordination backend, a particular one, there's some OpenStack project that require grouping or whatever. They can't use Memcache. They need whatever Zookeeper. That's something that is a bit scary to look at, because you never know whether you're providing a good enough backend. So you shouldn't even there should be a clearer path of can I use this or that. We don't want to use them all. It's likely you have like a common one. That's something I run in with other OpenStack project. So the retyping, you're using the block storage move, I believe, that you talked about. Actionable. Live migration, pure iSCSI, we don't have that. We use RBD libvirt, just works. Error management, the cleanup. Reservations, not so much. As I said, the lockings, maybe that's related to reservation. The RBD exclusive lock that we manually have to remove, otherwise it will not. It's going to be a read-only volume. So, and that's something we even had that a couple of weeks ago. Maybe it was on Wallaby, still not Xena, but there was a VM that had obviously strange I/O errors. It was actually just in read-only mode because the lock was on it. We don't know. We looked at the logs. If you can see something, it didn't fix itself. We stopped the VM. We removed the exclusive lock. Had it boot cleanly. There was no file system errors whatsoever. It replayed the journal, and but we never do any locking. So it was actually Cinder placing the lock on it. So that's something And that would lead to better user message. If the volume is read only, it would be very nice to report that as for whatever reason that it cannot be used.
That is going to
do.
But what we could do in the RBD driver is to, when a volume becomes available to the Cinder side, see if it can remove, if it has a log, and remove it. Maybe that is something that can be added to the RBD driver itself.
Well, you're actually placing the logs. So for some layer of protection, you're making use of that feature in RBD to lock it, to not have a different, if it's like the single attach, not multi-attach, maybe to protect it in that sense. But as I said, it went out of state, and I'm not talking about a dying compute node that never reported back or something that's left. Actually, out of the regular operations of live migrating machines somewhere, it was a lock that was just left. Exclusive RBD lock on the RBD image. That was it. Yeah, I remember, and that kind of I need to look at is a block alignment. Something we talked about, and not at the was it a PTG? No, it was a weekly. Somebody brought up the issue of 512 bytes versus 4K blocks to expose that to machine. That's something I found kind of, I wouldn't say sad, but it was something I was really interested in, but it lost a bit of steam. I don't remember at which weekly that was, but storage efficiency, everything that reduces latency would be great, right? So misaligned blocks I/O latency is just hell, and if you're not making best of the hardware you have, it's just sad. So that'd be a nice feature. That's about all I can think of as quickly as I jumped into that mode. That was the discussion there. Was it? Oh, is it that? Why is it that? That was it the right link? Sorry, I kind of miscopied that first time. That was the 4K thing. Yeah. Trent Lloyd, that was the canonical. He explained quite a bit of the inner workings of compatibility mode and everything about that he pushed forward at. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember looking at this 4K stuff quite a while back. I'll have to look at it and see where we were going with all that. I think there was a push to do it in a way that more drivers could leverage it, and I'm not sure if anyone ever really figured out how to go about that.
Yeah, we have some Windows-heavy people. I'm not one of them, but they and us, we chatted about I/O performance being subpar on the Windows machines compared to the Linux machines, and I immediately thought about that issue. Then I asked back whether that was still being considered, and yeah, I don't know if that's something actually related to that particular performance issue they were seeing. But as I said, misaligned blocks or unnecessary amplification in I/O operations in a high latency environment as storage is just something that would be nice to get rid of.
I think we actually have a provider geometry option that can be passed to Nova in the connection information.
There's an indication, I believe, that a kernel can figure out about the mass storage devices. They report it themselves, but it's about how to expose that for the Cinder volumes. As I said, that was a while back, that issue. I know there was discussion about how to expose that or change the default.
is that I think we already have that feature in OpenStack, and we could leverage it in RBD. I think the bits are there. I'm going to look into Nova to see if it's there, because I think it is.
Yeah, but I think we still need to do some work to tie it into volume types and how admins actually set it up and all that. I think some drivers do it with config options. It depends on the driver.
It's almost a year ago. I just looked at my own comment. I mentioned the Windows thing in February this year when we looked at the performance thing. That's where I thought back about the whole thing, asked whether it's still being pursued. But yeah, as I said, maybe that's something that's not as important to many people, but again, would be a nice improvement if that could work within like Cinder and Nova communication, if that's actually the missing bit. But yeah, thanks guys. That was more time slot than I could ask for. I thought, well, if I get like a minute to quickly ask somebody about the back end, it would be more than yeah. Thank you very much for making
it's
it
called
an
the
open
operator hour. So
yeah, if it's just it's good. Yeah, I was gonna say
one operator, 1 hour.
If you're lucky. Oh yeah. That's bad luck to the other guys that missing the opportunity. Yeah. And again, thanks for being so open, listening to other people's pains. That's very nice.
Yeah, Christian, I have a couple of questions for you, by the way, if I may.
Yeah, shoot.
Question number one: you back up all those volumes, but how often do you have to restore them? You have that experience, right?
Yes, very seldomly. Everybody wants restore, but yeah, you know the saying. No, yeah, certainly we back up like 99% of the time and restore 0.1. Yeah.
Yes, I see. So, well, that obviously happens, but at least it works, right?
Yeah, we never had a complaint about that. We do actively test that in a unit test suite that we run. We're just using Ansible and using the OpenStack SDK to set up various scenarios and to make sure that our install, not just your software that's tested by unit tests and Tempest and whatever, but actually our deployment, all the configuration has a certain set of features, and that's something. That's one of them. Volume resizing, a backup, a restore, a snapshot, spawning a volume out of a snapshot. All those things we test, and we actually ran into config errors. And we therefore know it works. We actually validate even the bits, the data that's on the restored volume. So yeah, we know it works. If that was your question, yes, the feature works.
Do you have any problem with how much RAM the restore process uses? Because it has to read the whole thing, a whole backup segment at a time.
Not yet, actually. We have 500 gigs and 1 terabyte or 2 terabytes of memory in the machines. We not yet ran into an issue with that, honestly. I'm not saying you obviously know more about possible improvements, but we never ran into an issue with that.
All right. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, certainly.
Yeah, really, thanks, Christian, for joining, and we had a productive operator hour, and we got certainly very good feedback on things we can improve at.
I'm not sure
Yeah,
if there is anybody else that maybe wants to say anything. Any other operator?
Yeah.
I filed bugs.
And you fix them as well, so you're good.
I guess the only thing that I will say, which is other issues that I've brought up recently, which are non-trivial to address, and I fully acknowledge that, is the operational details of what's actually happening right now, and the ability to safely shut down each of the services is becoming more and more critical as time goes on for me, because we get a lot of our attachment inconsistencies due to restarting our pods, which is where our Cinder volume service runs. As well as the other issue that I have in the Etherpad planning with respect to being able to have more actions that should just work for customers that don't currently, because a particular data store gets full in a back end, but there are other data stores available when some of these actions should just always work. But in general, I think Cinder's pretty good, but the problems that we run into are quite difficult to overcome and requires a lot of manual babysitting. I have like 10 tabs open right now where I'm migrating volumes constantly because I'm trying to free up space because we can't do snapshots when the data store gets full and customers complain, and that's the kind of stuff that Cinder should be more cloud-like. But we can talk about that later.
I'm interested in the first two topics you mentioned, which are being able to know what's going on with Cinder at each time, and also the cleanly stopping the service within a pod, not manually in a normal systemd environment, which that one I already know how to. It's about the pod getting killed and being able to properly wait a specific amount of time so it is done cleanly. Yep.
Yeah, that's an issue that I run into pretty much every week, where I have to roll out fixes for other things that we have going on, and I invariably have a lot of patches in Cinder itself in our fork, which is still based on train. There's like 130, 140 patches. And whenever I roll out a simple fix, that requires restarting all the pods, and I manually have to look at the log files to find out what each of those pods are doing, to make sure that if it's just doing get volume stats, that it's probably okay to restart it, but doesn't necessarily mean that it is, because there could be some long-running migrations or backups that are going on, and unless the log is being constantly written to with actions, then I can't really tell. So there's no way to tell right now safely if it's okay to shut down a pod, to restart it. And yeah, it would be nice to know, that also is related to this top command that I would eventually like to have to actually be able to see all the actions. I kind of fake it with an infinite loop script that I wrote that actually just looks at state changes within the database, so I can see that there's volumes being created or deleted or in deleting or attaching reserved. Stuff like that pops up and shows up, and it's kind of nice to run, but it's not overly useful in determining whether I can shut down a pod or not, which is eventually what I want.
One question: when you're shutting down a pod to make sure that you don't break your attach and detaches, what is your termination grace period, seconds, whatever, in your deployment? Because the default is 30 seconds, which is less than the time we have for a possible attach and detach. So
I don't know what it is off the top of my head. I'd have to look at the deployments, but in our case, it's actually worse because we actually, for an attachment, could have actually a migration going on first. We have made changes such that we allow migrations during an attach request, because of a lot of limitations within VMware. that has required us to have multiple vCenter installs per availability zone. So when a customer creates a volume, it could land in the quote-unquote wrong vCenter. And if it has data, that's even worse. So that way when an attachment happens, the VM that's trying to attach could be in vCenter 1, but the volume lives in vCenter 2. And so what we've done is underlying the attachment process, we've kicked off a fake scenario where we actually do a migration underneath it, and the customer's no wiser except for the fact that they complain that their attachments are taking a while. But at the end of the day, it works. And so that's what's most important for us and our customers, is that no matter what action a customer is trying, it should just work. If it's theoretically possible that it should, it really should. And that has led me to the other major issue of, extending, snapshotting, backing up, and all these things. If there's space within the back end, it should just work. It doesn't matter where the volume actually lives right now, whether it's on a completely full data store or not. If there's space in that back end for another pool, Cinder should fix that if it's able to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that aligns with some of the requests that we've seen from the operators in the spreadsheet we went through earlier, as in better recovery, and I think we just discussed it right now with backups. If the backups are interrupted in the middle, it should be able to pick it up and try again and continue, which is similar to what you're saying. Is I don't care what happens, please just complete the operations. Yep.
Yes. Yeah. Cinder's 90% of the way of really being what I consider commercial grade or enterprise grade in the respect that it mostly does just work, but there are some special use cases that when you start filling up your cloud, you really run into them, and then it's a really big problem, and it's really difficult to mitigate that. And that's where I am now, is because the majority of our value of our cloud versus the hyperscalers is the ability for us to manage our storage. We gain a lot of value, I guess I'll say, with respect to being able to overuse our storage, but then we become full in our data stores, but then we have to manage that. So that is the gray area, difficult area, but I think any deployer of Cinder will eventually run into these problems as they start getting more utilization. We've just gotten there really quickly, and we stay on that edge perpetually.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so with respect to dealing with snapshots and stuff, for our back end, which is VMware, which is total crap, but that's what we're forced to use. Our snapshots are full clones, basically. And for the majority of the rest of the drivers in Cinder, some of them that I've personally created and worked on, the snapshot is nothing more than metadata. And so, the way Cinder, the assumptions within Cinder make a lot of sense. But if it's a full clone that can live somewhere else, we should be able to move it somewhere else where there is space, because doing a backup, the first thing for an attached volume that happens is a snapshot. And if you're trying to back up a volume on a pool, that's totally full, you can't do a backup because you can't do a snapshot. And from a customer's perspective, they don't care. They just want the backup to work. And in our case, we have to do a lot of manual massaging and migrating and stuff to make that backup even start. And a lot of the times the backups are kicked off at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. We don't hear about it until, someone around the planet is awake to handle those tickets. So for me and for our deployment, these issues are major issues, and are difficult to solve, unfortunately, too. anyway, I thanks for all your support and listening to some of my complaints about things that are, especially with respect to the pool stuff. This seems like an oversight from our standpoint from when we implemented pools to begin with. But it's been working for a lot of people evidently. But I just, when you get highly utilized like we have, then it's like, wait a minute, this doesn't make any sense. Anyway, that's it for me. If anybody else wants to talk, go for it.
We are already at the end of the operator hour, and thanks Walt for sharing all the things. And later during the PTG, we will also discuss on that. Walt has added some topics. So I think we could utilize a break before the next topic discussion, a quick 10-minute break. Yeah, I will take the silence as yes. So we will resume in 10 minutes. Let me just check the UTC time for it. I think it's 16:15 UTC. Yeah, we will resume. I will put it on the Etherpad and yeah. And I got a ping from Gman asking about the secure RBAC discussion. So are you planning to discuss that during PTG, like any update regarding that?
No. Yeah, I guess. What was he wondering? What the status of Cinder is?
So he said like the goals for Antelope are already done in Nova Neutron Glance Keystone, but not in Cinder. And I still have to go through the device role. I'm not sure about it. But maybe we can. I think you are only available tomorrow, right? So maybe we can see if we can have a session, or I could just go through the expectations of the cycle and discuss about it.
I'll look into that and come up with something. But either Thursday or Friday.
Okay. I thought you had PTG sessions on Thursday and Friday, right?
Yeah, but they're
PC, sorry.
yeah, they're shifted. So they start. So I think the first 2 hours I can be at Cinder, and then the last 2 hours I'll be. Let me double check though. I thought that was how it was working.
Okay, so we have a light agenda on Thursday. We have only 2 topics, driver related. So we can start with RPAC then on Thursday.
Yeah, the TC doesn't start till 1500 on Thursday.
Oh, so yeah, we have 2 hours. So, yeah, assuming it's not very hectic for you to.
Yeah, that should be good.
Okay, I will add it up there. And see people returning, so maybe we can get started with the next topic. I've already updated the infra events. And Brian, would you like to click on the spotlight or highlight button?
I don't have it. I've never had the highlight button, so I've never actually been able to do it. So sorry. I don't know, Pete, do you have it?
You mean in Etherpad?
No, in the
I don't know what
Blue Jeans.
Yeah, Blue Jeans, there's a way you can like mark the recording. Oh, you have to start the recording. Oh, recording's going.
Yeah,
Okay.
sorry, I forgot to stop it.
Yeah, I always forget that too. Oh, Sophie, are you here?
Yes, I'm here.
Do you have the
recording?
So Luigi,
Yeah,
I think, posted
Oh.
already on the chat he wrote.
I did it too.
Okay, then we can get started with the next topic, and I think it was added by Pete.
Yes.
Actually, I think this
Well, I'm most interested in it.
Okay.
So, but what happened? So the small history here is that I looked at it and said, "Well, that's obviously wrong. Let's just like fix it." And then, at least Alan and Gorka came and said, like, there are some way more issues than I realized about this, and I was just completely ignorant about how all of this works, and they thought, well, we'll talk about it on PTG, and we'll consider how to implement it. And so, for example, it was a complete news for me that volume sizes are updated at the time, updated in the cache at the time cache is instantiated. Because I thought, well, a cache is a cache. You never update anything in a cache. A cache is something that already exists with all its attributes. At least CPU and file system caches work like that. But apparently this is not quite what cache is in this case. Not just cache.
Yeah, I think Pete, I'm not sure if I explained it correctly back then. The cache is not modified once the cache entry is created. What is modified is if you create a volume from a cache entry that is larger than the entry in the cache. So if you have a cache volume of 1 gigabyte and you want the same thing at 2 gigabytes, then that is the one that gets extended, the one the user receives, not the one in the cache. The one in the cache remains 1 gigabyte, you clone it, and then you extend it. That is the current approach.
So what if someone clones it again? I mean, that's what cache is for. It improves repeated operations, right?
Then it's fine if somebody else uses it again. If it's 3 gigabytes, the 1 gigabyte cache would be cloned, and it will be extended to 3.
Yeah, so generally we download the whole image from Glance site, and in this case we just clone the image cache volume and extend it. So it is a much faster operation than as I said, downloading the whole image again and again.
The problem that we have is that we currently populate the cache using the size of the first volume that it's requested. So if the first volume that I request is 1 petabyte and the Glance image is 100 megabytes, then every single volume that is cloned afterwards that is created for that entry will be 1 petabyte, just because the first one is like that. And when we started discussing how to solve this is when we saw that we have two different ideas of how a cache should work. Eric postulated that a cache should always use the right size and should be no need to extend. So if I create a volume from an image for a 1 gigabyte volume, that cache should only be hit if I request another 1 gigabyte volume. If I request a 2 gigabyte, that's a different volume. And a different volume should be created for that one.
So then you will have two cache entries, one for 1 and one for 2.
Yeah, but I disagreed. I said, I like the other approach best, which is you create the smallest volume that you can create in the cache for the image that was requested. So if the image that was requested fit in 1 gigabyte, you will create the cache entry with 1 gigabyte, and then you do the extend for any volume that is greater. So here we have two opinions on how the cache should work. And that's why it's a discussion, because both are valid. I mean, it depends on how you look at it.
Okay.
I think Glass does provide us some parameters, some attributes of the image, like there is a min size and there is a virtual size as well. It is not populated every time, but probably we can utilize this to create the cache entry, and then after that the actual volume. If I remember correctly, the cache volume is created at first, and then we clone the actual volume requested by user from it in the first time also.
Correct.
So do we have drivers that do not allow it? Gork, I have a stupid question. Do we have drivers that do not allow extend? Like you created a
They
volume,
don't
and this
allow.
volume is not in something mapped like a LVM, but like an actual partition. And then you cannot really extend it. Something maybe behind it. Do
I
you have drivers
believe
like that?
all our backends support volume extension if it's an offline volume. Online extension is different, but offline, just a volume that it's sitting there and nobody's using it, I believe all the backends support extending it. I could be wrong. I think that is the case. So the question is, should we implement it one way,
Okay,
the other way?
okay,
Both?
Gurka, I have a question, another one. So suppose we go your way. We create those volumes and extend them. What does the cache buy us as a cache? Where is the economy? Like, why cannot we re-download in this case? Because
Okay,
all the garbage, all the zeros are no longer cached. They're added later, right? So
well,
you
first of
cannot
all,
create
you
copy
have
on
to
write.
download. You download for glance to a temporary directory. That is network usage, IO to disk. Then you create a new volume. Then you attach the volume, but it can be slow. You attach operation. Then you use QEMU image maybe to convert from QCOW2 to RAW into a disk.
Oh.
And then you have the final disk. Whereas if you use clone, you just do clone, extend, gone.
Right.
No attachment, no
Okay.
IO.
No. Yeah, I've got the point. So you still get some savings even there is no copy on write or something like that. So
Yep. Because sometimes the clone operation is basically the copy and write. What you do.
Yeah, that's what I was hoping for. So, but if you
Yes.
extend it, then that's probably, I don't know how that's.
For example, for RBD, it's copy and write. You extend, it's not a problem. It doesn't mean anything.
So just to understand the possible alternatives we have for this problem. So first one is maybe creating the smallest size volume which could accommodate the image. And another one I think was proposed that we could update the cache entry with the smallest size volume requested. Like if the first request was a 100 GB volume and the next request is a 10 GB volume which could accommodate the image, then we update the cache entry with the 10 GB volume. I remember these two, but if there are any,
that's the mixed version that I think Alan was proposing. The one Eric was proposing, if I remember correctly, is basically that the way you look for a cache entry is not by the image ID, but by a tuple. Image ID plus size. So you can have multiple cache entries for the same image, that from the same glance image. You can have a 1 GB cache entry and a 10 GB cache entry for the same image.
Okay.
That is the one that Eric proposed. And then there is the one that Rajat is mentioning now, which is a hybrid that Alan proposed, which is I create the first one that is requested. If a smaller one gets requested, I create it, and the old one gets evicted.
Okay. All right. So I have a question then, like about the original scheme that, like so Eric didn't pipe up, but suppose you described it fairly. So we have cache entries that correspond to the size, and maybe have multiply of them created from the same image. So in that case, why are we doing this if extension is possible? Like, either we want to, and is there a sense to avoid doing the extension that you proposed? is there anything bad about it? Because at first I thought maybe some drivers don't support it, and then we cannot extend. But if we always can extend, then what's the upside? Like obviously Eric had something in mind.
Yeah,
avoid a call to glance. So like the result would be like this: you look through this cache, but you cannot rely on that size. You still have to ask glance about what the actual size is. But that doesn't seem very expensive. It's not like you're re-downloading.
We don't have to ask glance about anything really. So
Also, there is actual size in there. Right.
Glance may have the size, but even if it doesn't have it, we don't care because we're going to download it to a temporary image, a temporary location in the disk, and we can use QEMU image to say what's the virtual size of this one once it's going to get complete.
And then we can save it a metadata of that volume, of that cache entry, let's say, right?
Yeah, we can say, okay, so this is the minimum size that this image will fit. So we create it on that size. So we have a way to figure out, in the normal process, we have a way to figure out the actual size that is the minimum.
All right.
I think we already
I got it. So,
executed.
okay, guys, I'm kind of concerned that Eric is keeping silent on that because that was his proposal originally. And it looks to me that Eric, that Gorka's idea with the extend is the most workable, but I don't know. Why was the original idea floated up? Because my understanding was that we didn't want to extend, but if that's okay, maybe the second one is obviously better.
I don't want to speak on why Eric thought that his proposal is better. So I kind of vaguely remember saying that.
I don't think it was ever really made as a proposal saying we should go do this. I think it was a idea while we were in the middle of discussing possible fixes for some of this stuff. I don't even hardly remember this discussion because I think it was just an idea while we were talking about this.
Okay.
All right then. So let's because I have to implement it. Let me restate what I'm hearing here and how I see it. So what Eric mentioned came to my mind first too, because I didn't want to have this additional instance, or I didn't want to do the additional work such as extending, and who knows if it works? What if it fails or whatever? Or for example, creates non-contiguous volume almost every time, and then people will be pissed at us that performance is bad, something like that. But if any of that is not an issue, then what Gorka is suggesting is better, and it is better because the cache is not using all that space for nothing, and we solve the original problem that customers complaining about, or operator in this case. Although actually we do have a Red Hat customer bug which is exactly the same. But either way, and what Alan's proposing seems like a needless complication. So that's why I wanted to go and try implement extension and present it. And if it addresses all the concerns, then just you guys plus two it. How about that?
I think to Alan's proposal, I think it was in line with there could be scenarios where the optimum is Alan's approach. So if you're usually creating volumes of a specific size constantly, then creating it of the right size is the best way, because you don't have to extend. It is going to be the right size of the bat. And if you suddenly start creating smaller ones, you say, okay, then that no longer is the good one. Let me do a smaller one. I'm not saying that I prefer that one. I'm just saying that maybe there are scenarios where it could be better. I prefer
Right.
the simple.
Well,
Okay.
okay, all right. I'm just thinking that if someone does that, he probably should be using a volume size that corresponds to the image, you know. But maybe I'm not considering something. For example, image can be a file system that can be extended, and like XFS, you can create a bigger volume and then make it to occupy the rest of the volume, something like that.
So I agree that going with the simpler approach would cause us less maintenance, less code, and would be a generic case for all. And even I think
Right.
on the glance side, they worked on something that would add the virtual size. So when you create an image with the import plugin, then it will always add the virtual size. So glance always provides that virtual size. And even if not, we already execute QMG info in our code for this flow. So we already have that kind of information, I think. So that should not be an issue. So I am also in favor of the second approach as mentioned in Etherpad.
Okay. Yeah, and another thing, I'm kind of concerned about my ability to implement it because I'm very new to Cinder and I want everything simplified as much as possible and then maybe improved. As long as I don't do something that precludes future improvement, then that's probably most reasonable. I mean, most reasonable in a way that you can expect some positive result from me. That's why I kind of trend that way. So, all right, with that, thanks a lot for indulging my ignorance and talking it over at this PTG. It was very useful. I think I have a decision here.
Thank you for
Which we can write into
volunteering.
either. Yeah, all right.
So Pete, I
Do we
mentioned
need a spec for this? Because this is basically a bug fix.
yeah. So I can skip that part. Yeah.
I mean, in my mind, the bug is we are creating the cache entry with the wrong size, which is the first volume that it's requested. I would say
So
it as that being the bug, but
yeah. So do we have a spec like for the original image cache feature? I'm not sure, and we could update that with this information. That would also be great.
There is one.
Okay.
Oh, so yeah, thanks. Whoever did that, I'm saving it.
So because I noticed this similar pattern, like we implemented the availability zone support in volume types, and the spec is very outdated. Like we implemented something else only, and in the spec we still say the old way. So it was very confusing for me. That's why I mentioned this. Yeah, thanks, Pete, for initiating this and working on it.
Okay. Oh yeah. So are specs mutable or not?
I was wondering about that. I don't think we've really changed them much so far. I don't know if we have any particular way we want to do that.
Yeah,
I
it's
think
usually
we've only done it, as far as I know, when we write the spec, it gets merged, and during the implementation, we see, oops, we missed this or we missed another, and we want to make the spec match what we are currently implementing.
Right, but that's probably the same cycle
right.
before
It's
it
usually
gotten archived or whatever.
But even if you change the old spec, it is still in the same directory, like the Liberty one, so it should get updated. Like not show up in master again, and we don't have a new one.
That's what I don't agree. I think we should write in the original one, this spec has been superseded by, and point to the new one. That way we can see that it is in the new cycle. That specific implementation, not the whole thing.
All right. Well, this is what IETF does for RFCs on the internet, but they don't have Git. That's I don't know if it changes anything for us.
I don't know. Maybe the thing to do is to put a note at the top of the old spec saying, since the spec was written, this bug came up.
Yeah, I think that's the best, so that people cannot. I mean, will know where to look at the new one. But
Yeah.
then
Well, is there a value
I
in
just
keeping
hit
the
in the,
old
when I was preparing to this PTG, I was looking for a spec for something, and I already forgot what it was. But basically, someone moved it from release to release without changing anything. Fortunately, I realized what happened, and I was able to find it.
That's usually when we don't actually implement it in the cycle that we say. So you have to repropose it again. So I propose it for this cycle. I don't finish it, like with the quota stuff. So I will have to resubmit it for the new cycle.
Right. Well, in my case, someone had a URL in a Google document somewhere, and it was 404. Disappeared. Yeah.
Yeah, that should actually, if you remember what that was, because we have redirects set up in the specs repo, so that when we move something, it should redirect. But it, sometimes people forget.
Okay. Anyway, so that's detail.
And
So the point,
yeah, Eric had
I
a
think,
good-
but right.
Eric had a good point about is there a reason to keep the old one?
Yeah, I'm not sure there's much value in keeping it at the old location if we're going to update it anyway. Especially if we have URL redirects.
No, I don't agree. I don't think those redirects work at all in practice.
Well, I think I'm more wondering if anyone actually links to these from anywhere. So I don't know.
I don't know. I think that's like the only way to find those specs, like, because otherwise you have to read through all of the directories and identify the ones that you like. No, yeah. I think they're all in Etherpads all over the place. At least that's how I find them.
so this one is in Liberty, and like this is very old. But if someone was had a spec in like Yoga, and then we changed it into Antelope, so if someone was using the Yoga release, they could refer to the Yoga spec for the current thing. Like that is what I was thinking about, to keep the original one. But this is very old, so I'm not sure about that. And even the
Yeah,
process
okay.
is
I
different
I
in
think
Nova. Yes, sorry, I was just saying, like in Nova, they repropose the spec. Like we move the spec every cycle if we don't implement it, but in Nova, they add a new spec in every release for that. Yeah, just mentioning.
The situation here is we don't need a spec for the bug that Pete's fixing. But on the other hand, we want this document to be accurate. So in case somebody goes to look at how does the image cache work, they don't, aren't misled. So, I mean, so I'm sort of inclined to say if we leave a note on the spec saying it's been revised to reflect bug fixes, and then just make the change on the spec so it's accurate. If somebody really needs to see what used to be there, they would know, all right, I'll go look at the Git history and find the old version. But I think let's leave it off the top of my head. I would say let's amend it so it's accurate. Leave it where it is in Liberty. Although if you think about it, if you have a strong feeling that it should be somewhere else, we can do that. But I think just some kind of note so people know this is revised from the original one. And then if they really care about doing, historical analysis, they can go dig up the old spec if they want. Because the specs repo is not branched. We just, organize it by folders.
I'm okay with that.
Well, we can think about it, and if anyone has second thoughts later in the week.
I actually don't think it's important enough to waste more time, because any solution is good as long as we have a spec that reflects it. And probably it's good enough to update the old one because it's just to reflect the changes and it's a bug fix. So yeah, I'm okay with that.
Yeah, as long as the information is accurate, it works for me as well.
All right then, thanks everyone. I wrote two items for my to-do. It's not like I don't trust Etherpad, but just so I have it on tap.
Yeah, thanks again, Pete, for discussing this. And I don't think we have enough time to discuss another topic. We only have 10 minutes. So probably I will move this one to some other day where we have some extra time. Okay, I think we can conclude for the day. I will just stop the recording.